Jesus teaches emotional intelligence through the parable of the two sons. As the afternoon sun bathed the disciples in its golden light, they sat together with Jesus. The day had been long, filled with preaching and healing, but beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of tension. Each disciple carried their own emotional burdens. Peter, always passionate and quick to speak, had been growing more impatient with Judas, whose quiet skepticism often clashed with Peter's fiery faith. John, though usually serene, had become increasingly withdrawn, troubled by the mounting opposition to their mission. Thomas, known for his doubts, seemed to wrestle inwardly with uncertainties that he never voiced aloud. James and Andrew had a minor argument earlier in the day, and though they had smoothed things over, a lingering frustration remained. Jesus, ever attuned to the hearts of those around him, sensed their inner unrest. He knew that while his disciples were strong in their commitment to spreading his message, they were still learning how to navigate the complex emotions that arose from their daily struggles. Understanding this, Jesus decided it was time to impart a valuable lesson about emotional intelligence, a lesson that would help them not only in their mission but also in their personal lives. Gently he addressed them, his voice calm and steady. "My beloved friends," Jesus began, "I see that your hearts are troubled. You carry many emotions with you, some openly, some hidden. Anger, frustration, doubt, and fear, these are natural feelings. But how you handle them will determine the peace you find within yourselves and with each other. Let me tell you a story, a parable that will help you understand the importance of emotional wisdom." The disciples, always eager for Jesus' teachings, leaned in closer as he began the parable of the two sons and the wise father. There was once a wise father who lived in a peaceful village. He had two sons, both of whom he loved deeply. The father was known throughout the village for his calm demeanor and the deep wisdom with which he approached life's challenges. People often came to him for advice because they trusted his judgment and the kindness with which he spoke. However, the two sons of this wise man were very different in temperament. The elder son, Samuel, was fiery and impulsive. He felt his emotions strongly and had no hesitation in expressing them. When things went wrong, Samuel would shout in anger, blaming others for his misfortune. His temper was quick, and he often believed that showing his anger was a sign of strength, that by releasing his emotions outwardly, he could control the situation. The younger son, Daniel, was the opposite. He was quiet and introspective, often retreating into himself when faced with difficulties. Daniel believed that showing emotion, especially sadness or fear, was a sign of weakness. So he kept his feelings buried deep within, rarely speaking about what troubled him. He thought that by suppressing his emotions he was being strong, stronger than his brother, who wore his heart on his sleeve. One year, a great calamity befell their family. A severe drought struck the land, and the crops they had planted with such care and hope were destroyed. The family, once prosperous and full of optimism, now faced the possibility of losing everything. Both sons reacted to the disaster in their own ways. Samuel, true to his nature, became consumed with anger. He marched into the village square, cursing the skies and blaming the weather for their misfortune. He shouted at the villagers, accusing them of not doing enough to help during the drought. His outbursts became so intense that people began to avoid him, fearful of his rage. Samuel felt abandoned and isolated, but he could not see that it was his anger that drove people away. Daniel, on the other hand, responded with silence. He withdrew into himself even further, working tirelessly from sunrise to sunset, hoping that his hard labor might somehow reverse their family's fortunes. Yet, as the days passed, the weight of his unspoken sadness grew heavier. He never spoke of the grief he felt, believing that to do so would only burden his father and brother. Daniel thought that if he remained quiet and focused on his work, he could avoid the emotional pain altogether. But this silence began to erode his spirit, leaving him feeling disconnected from his family and the world around him. Seeing the suffering of his two sons, the wise father decided it was time to intervene. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the land, he called Samuel and Daniel to sit with him under the old fig tree in their yard. The father had always used this spot for reflection, and now he hoped that in this familiar place, his sons might find clarity. "My dear sons," the father began, his voice filled with love and concern, "I see that you both carry heavy burdens in your hearts. The loss of our crops has brought great hardship upon us, but I fear that the way you have dealt with your emotions has caused you even more suffering." Samuel, still simmering with anger, responded first. "How can I not be angry, father?" he exclaimed. "Everything we worked for is gone. The villagers did nothing to help, and now they avoid me as if this is my fault. I have every right to be angry." The father looked at Samuel with gentle understanding. "Anger is a natural response to frustration, my son," he said. "But when anger is allowed to control you, it blinds you to the truth. The villagers do not avoid you because they do not care. They fear your outbursts, your harsh words. Anger, when expressed recklessly, pushes people away. It is not anger itself that is wrong, but how you choose to express it." Samuel, taken aback by his father's words, listened more carefully. "You see, Samuel," the father continued, "anger can be a powerful force for change. But it must be tempered with wisdom and compassion. When anger is expressed thoughtfully, it can inspire action and bring people together. But when it is used like a weapon, it creates division and isolation. You have felt isolated, but it is not the villagers who have left you. It is your uncontrolled anger that has driven them away. Learn to express your feelings with kindness, and you will find that others are more willing to listen and help." Samuel nodded, understanding now that his unchecked anger had caused more harm than good. The father then turned to Daniel, who had been sitting quietly, his head bowed. "And you, my dear Daniel," the father said softly, "you have hidden your pain from us. You work so hard, yet I can see the sadness in your eyes. Why do you not speak of what troubles you?" Daniel looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I didn't want to burden you, father," he said in a quiet voice. "I thought if I just kept working I could fix things. But the more I try, the more I feel like I'm drowning in my own sadness." The father placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "My son," he said, "sadness like anger is a part of life. It is not a burden to be carried alone. When you keep your sadness hidden, it only grows heavier, like a stone sinking deeper into your heart. But when you share it, you allow others to help you carry that weight. There is no shame in feeling sad, and there is no weakness in asking for help." Daniel, overwhelmed by his father's kindness, let the tears flow freely. For the first time he spoke openly about his sadness, and in doing so he felt the weight in his heart begin to lift. "You must understand, my sons," the father continued, "that emotions are like the changing seasons. Anger, sadness, joy, they come and go, each with its purpose. Anger can inspire action, but only when it is expressed with wisdom. Sadness can bring healing, but only when it is shared with those who love you. The key to peace is not in denying your emotions, nor in letting them control you. It is in understanding them, expressing them with care, and allowing them to guide you toward wisdom and connection with others." As Jesus finished the parable, the disciples sat in reflective silence. They realized that the story was more than just a tale of two brothers. It was a lesson for them for how they should handle their own emotions. Each disciple saw themselves in either Samuel or Daniel, and they understood that emotional intelligence was about balance, about knowing when to express and when to listen. Peter, who had often been quick to anger, was the first to speak. "Master," he said quietly, "I understand now. I've let my anger get the better of me thinking it was strength. But I see now that it has only caused division. Jesus smiled warmly. Peter, strength is not in overpowering others with your emotions. True strength lies in understanding your feelings, expressing them with wisdom, and using them for good. Anger, when controlled, can inspire great action. But unchecked, it leads only to destruction. John, who had always been quiet and introspective, spoke next. Master, I see myself in Daniel. I've kept my feelings hidden, believing it was the best way to stay strong. But I now understand that my silence has only made me feel more alone. Jesus nodded gently. John, it is not wrong to feel deeply. But you must remember that you are not alone in your burdens. Share them with your brothers, and you will find that the weight is easier to bear. Emotional intelligence is not just about understanding your own heart, but also about trusting others to help you carry the weight. Thomas, known for his doubts, looked at Jesus and asked, "But Master, how can we be sure we are expressing our emotions in the right way? What if we don't fully understand what we're feeling?" Jesus smiled at Thomas, understanding the depth of his question. Emotions are complex, Thomas, and you may not always understand them fully. But that is why you must take time to reflect, to pray, and to listen to your heart. Your emotions are like the wind. They may be strong and unpredictable at times, but with patience and faith, you will learn to navigate them. Trust that God has given you these emotions for a reason, and with His guidance, you will find the right way to express them. From that day on, the disciples began to apply what they had learned from the parable. Peter worked on controlling his temper, speaking his truth with more patience and understanding. John opened up more to his brothers, sharing his burdens instead of carrying them alone. Even Thomas, though still prone to doubt, learned to trust his emotions more, knowing that they were part of his journey of faith. Through this lesson, Jesus had shown them that emotional intelligence was not about suppressing or indulging in their emotions, but about understanding them, expressing them wisely, and using them to grow closer to one another and to God. Just as the wise father in the parable had guided his sons, so too did Jesus guide his disciples, teaching them to navigate the challenges of life with grace, wisdom, and love. In the end, they learned that emotions, whether anger, sadness, or joy, were gifts from God, meant to be handled with care, expressed with wisdom, and used to bring about peace and understanding in their lives. This lesson in emotional intelligence became a cornerstone of their spiritual growth, helping them to live with greater compassion, empathy, and connection to both God and their fellow man. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe my channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.